Chapter 3. Unseen, Unheard, Unanswered. The unread leaves of an open book whose name bespoke the dance of days were turned by the sighs of a changing sky. Over an emerald dawn, breaking clouds were as the darkened canopy of a great celestial tree, the stars between glittering seeds of new life. The butterflies that had appeared as fallen leaves in invisible colour shined to a sky without a sun and without a moon. 1,000 lonely stories turned their pages towards a new day, rising in spirals from a hole in the earth to voyage into the realm of sylphs above like sylvan shade, becoming lost in the boscage. Soon came the sun, and again the globe was drenched in gold like a globule of resin upon the world tree. In exchange for his light, the sun's glory hid the stars from mortal sight. The foliage above burnt away as metallic gleams arced along the curves of uniform buildings shaped as standing bullets beyond the rim of the pit. Capturing the invisible against heavenly rays, moisture condensed upon the strands of a spider's web like stranded stars, glistening upon strings as thin as the line between love and lust. Dead in the net, a stiff husk of a moth was shadowed against the dawn. The dark body of the spider seemingly swallowed what remained of the cosmos as it made for its prey. The black webs of man, parasitizing power cables, strangled the air above the pit, siphoning electricity from the main city's standardized grid, sloping down to the upper levels of the slums. The ring of Rulia that divided sky between north and south was itself divided behind depressed wires dangling in haphazard mass entanglements. Watching the world, eyes that whispered like the rustling leaves of a forest that no longer existed, followed the distant glints of aerial transport ships like distant insects. A white Sifaka lemur sat listening to the scents in the wind like streaming colours, searching for violet vines that crept between the cracks of colourless concrete. The Sifaka lemur was alike to the Varroa variety, although colloquially monikered a cat monkey. For humans kind to those beyond their kin, his given name was Mew by the cooing calls he was known to make. A fluttering nose like a feline's muzzle upon a face both bare and dark as a new moon looked up to the circling squawks and screeches from scores of tiny pterosaurs. The flying reptiles risked electrocution, flapping past cable clusters to feast upon the swirling midge swarms that laid their larvae down in the stagnant and opaque surfaced groundwater at the depths of the pit. That seemingly undrainable pool had emerged from the breached water table brought about by the old mine's operations. The shanty town that later came to fill the hole left behind networked valved pipes to pump the aquifer for steam-powered utilities, cooking ranges, and convection heat room radiators. From the slums struck out the slicing line of a red laser, scrawling the sky in searing search, eviscerating 3 of the reptiles in single streak, leaving their bisected carcasses in flailing fall amidst a mist of blood. Staunch haunches launched the lemur back to cling onto a vertical pipe just beneath the jungle of false vines. Frantic flapping from the rest of the flock fled from the pit's centre and overhead to the terraced settlements where they rode the thermal waves of chimney steam out and away. Mew knew that keeping proximity to the snake-like wires would keep the humans from discharging a weapon in avoidance of severing power lines and risking the spitting hisses to spark a fire. Within the safety of another's danger, the Sifaka clucked a soft call, alerting his troop to the threat he saw. Their response came from out of sight, higher along the slope. It was up there where the leaching lines were in densest throngs, and the lemurs were known to rest surrounded by the humans' own implements as deterrents. Those primates, like humans, were social creatures, choosing to live in groups of their own kind, yet like humans, some, such as Mew, preferred the company of solitude. Once the vibrations of violence had silenced, Mew the lemur leapt down to resume his foraging alone. With each day came the advent of another adversity. The pit was a host to hostility, and yet the lemurs possessed an innocence. Bounding and bouncing across building gaps with long tail trailing behind, just as quickly did a Sifaka's mood seem to bounce back following a tribulation. Living only in the moment, little did he know that those sideways skips brought passing giggles to windowed faces of all ages that otherwise would not have had reason to. Folk then and there still believed that the swiftness of animals arose from an absence of guilt's permanence. His fluffy fur shined snow-white amidst grime, the fleeting spirit of a murdered land. The Rakatan slums were a maze from which few could escape. In cramped alleys littered and damp, the static of gnat clouds like brown ghosts seemingly fed upon misery itself, drinking tears, if not sorrow, from humans and pets alike, finding sustenance within mucus secretions by mechanisms of a sponged tongue. The people of that place no longer offered a resistance against those pests' persistence. At a crossing of corridors, a small group of children sat squatted beside a puddle, poking at that morning's manifestation of an amorphous anomaly, a gelatinous lump of silent white, in size related by them as to a deflated football. A small for his age 8-year-old boy mused aloud if that blob were the body of a fallen star he had seen the night before, looking up to the hazed and hazel sky framed by rooftops as if hoping to glimpse another. Man, you really are a rock for brains. Fallen stars are just rocks. I don't even go to school anymore, and I know that. The 12-year-old that spoke with premature gruff wore his billed cap backwards, passively shuffling a deck of playing cards they planned to match. A third child, rotund and breathing heavily, stood as he patted in backhand the still crouched second's shoulder. Hey, you know, it looks just like that time that stupid roofer, fell from the roof and his head cracked like a watermelon, all rotten and white inside, yeah? Remember that? The fat boy laughed insincerely and insecurely, merely pretending to like the things that unsettled him. The one with the cards paused shuffling to look over at his acquaintance with a puzzled tilt, finding the comparison of poor taste. He wanted to make him feel a fool for saying so seemingly callous a thing. You're always thinking about fucking food, huh? When the second child looked back at the anomaly, not caring to see or hear the other's arguments to the contrary, he found himself acknowledging the suggestion. The viscous substance did bring to mind the mush of that substrate for consciousness, of viscera and the other side of flesh. It occurred to him then that no flies surrounded the pale remains. Likewise, no discernible scent of putrefaction, yet his instincts insisted that it was something dead. He wondered if perhaps it had in sooth fallen from somewhere far above. The hum of an airship came to pass over the alley, the hull rifting through the low bank of cloud-like sea foam. The gentle vessel was regal in size and design, a multi-deck yacht of the sky. A coating like mother of pearl in which one could see hints of every colour sparkled in the sunshine. The mechanisms of its levitation were 12 revolving and hollow spheres of green ceramic, the spinning of which produced acoustics capable of lift. The sphere's distributions were 2 each below bow and stern, 3 for port and starboard, and the remaining 2 on either side of the centerboard. Oh wow, it's that circus ship! The first child stood up as if to be closer to that defiant dream drifting away beyond the entrapping webs of the slum. Really? I thought people were joking again when they said the circus landed over the rim. Ah, we could have gone, guys, he sighed. Rotten luck all the time, I tell you. Just like with them cards. The other boy, still shuffling the playing deck, stifled a chuckle as he watched the ship, concealing the fact that the so-called luck of the draw was by the sly skill of his own rigged riffling to always set the cards in his favour. As with the illusions of a circus, he believed that magic and fate in all their formless forms existed only in perception by the ignorance of the gullible and their inability to see any underlying mechanisms. In his eyes, making others believe in false magic was to make others believe they had no control. He saw the distant windows of the airship's many cabins and wondered briefly what its crew thought of them from up there, if they even bothered to look down. He supposed the rift between their and his manner of being was not so far. The boy looked away with a hidden huff for allowing to think of himself as less than, if only for a moment. Hey, you know what? I think I figured out what this blob is. The scruffy-voiced child began to turn with a mischievous smirk towards the rotund boy. It looks just like what your mum makes me do every night before we go to— Ah, what the? Ugh! The bullied boy had scooped up a finger's worth of the strange jelly and jammed it into the second boy's ear. That'll teach you. The second chased after the third down the alley, and the first followed behind. Mew the lemur had been watching while munching upon a leafy wall vine, himself hanging from an electrical wall box. Caution contained his curiosity towards the unknown scent of the silent substance. It was something to be avoided. Although the lemur's environment of slabbed concrete was unrecognizable to the lush jungles for which their ancestors had been adapted, the rules of their routine remained the same. The poisonous berry became the poisoned morsel left by a porch to bait a meal of meat. The cycling fruit trees became the fruit stands of the tented alley bazaar. The ever-present bird songs by which the moods of the forest were known became the ever-variable voices of human chatter. Yet a lifetime in hiding did not by default hide life's joys from Mew. He found a brief sort of happiness when he found food, and a further fulfillment still when he ate. Where once his species satisfied a supplementary role within the ecosystem in dispersing seeds throughout the forest, he could neither miss nor notice the passing of that purpose. And so, treating the slime no differently than a toxic mushroom, the lemur carried on, always finding the flow as surely as a stream of water. Below and atop the rooflines, posters and billboards in corporate orange advertised not products, but labour opportunities at the remaining and neighbouring Rakatan amber mines, stealing away what little sight of the sky remained from those that sought escape from the pit only to be led down another. Brown clouds like waves above brought with them the sense of distant lands, and the clouds darkened with tears at what they had seen. From around a corner in an alley, a small girl hurriedly returned to her doorstep with 3 dangling and dead pterosaurs gripped by the ankles, their already spilled viscera flopping within a blood-splotched plastic bag. Awaiting the girl, a heavy-set woman in a tank top of faded blue and white horizontal stripes observed the coming clouds with the broad barrel of a laser-emitting rifle nonchalantly reclined upon her shoulder. The harsh air was already replete with wafts of dirt and dust, upturned in pungent petrichor. She looked past the ever-dimming light of the crystal lantern fixtures to the eroded and rounded-off rooftop corners from which ran down the black-streaked stains of acid rain, alike to a creeping mould that crawled to corrode the ever-embrittling safety bars of their windows. The woman wondered for how much longer all their work would remain before snorting and spitting out a clump of phlegm. Their door was shut to an emptying alleyway. A hopping rodent with a trunk proboscis scurried for cover behind a stack of broken plastic crates. Mew, too, had sensed the impending rain, yet by a confidence in his extended leaps, both heightened by his youth of 3 years, risked to extend his search for leaves. Reaching another tier of rooftops, the lemur saw what it could only categorize as a colossal centipede of spheres crawl across the vault of visible sky. In actuality, an aerial freight hauler transporting a row of oil tanks. Such machines Mew could only assume were the pets of man, the creature seemingly without predator. Hidden away from the city's sight, Mew hopped past yet another pile of slime drooped across a wind vane. Steam stacks smeared into the upper clouds of dust and rain, swirling together, veiling the high noon sun into a dim and pale orb. Black tendrils marked the descent of the cloud's lament, the image alike to the toxic rain's remains upon stone. Recognizing the folly in following the scent of foliage into an air pervaded by petrica, Mew turned tail midway across a clearing back the way he came. Perhaps in part to lifetimes of gripping branches and ledges, the lemurs of the slums would at times grab the odd object to smash open a sturdy nut, and by extension could hold small discarded cartons or stray cloths as overhead shields against the elements when skipping between shelter on flat terrain. In the absence of either, Mew chose the nearest, most approximate thing, the cover of an open book. The sizzle of drizzle began. In silence, lightning sprawled like a spider's web across the sky, a violet violence. The highland plateau upon which Rakata was dug since antiquity possessed a climate of stable unpredictability. When the lemur brought the old tome with him beneath the upper story overhang of a cantilevered slab, he did not immediately notice that the book's leaves had been left unwet, warded against the erosion of the world by a spell within its words. Mew set the thing aside and sat upon his haunches to watch the passing of patterns in the rain, the alternating intensity with which it fell, observing but not predicting the swirls of steam billowing away from venting pipes. Across the way, pterosaurs that roosted upside down from another roof squabbled in squawks for the right of space. Somewhere a woman laughed, and someplace else a man yelled. There was no discernible pattern to the jagged juts of concrete huts upon the wall of the slum that loomed in precarious precipice, neither to the number of windows which held a light. In that vista of enclosure, Mew only knew a world of static disorder. Beside him, by the size of the wind, the lemur heard something alike to a cooing call. Startled, his eyes bright against the dark of his face, could not see the sound. Instead, Mew found that in the time he had tried to make sense of Rakata's repetition of randomness, many ants had begun to follow an unknown flow in hypnotic wall around the open book. Their minuscule march was a reflection of the invisible, abiding to a greater force as did fish by tides and as did birds to the earth's magnetic lines. The swirling swarm was itself a vortex for curiosity, pulling Mew in to inspect the insects. None touched its pages, so repelled and compelled to dance in a confusing cohesion of balanced opposition, an equilibrium of clockwise and anti-clockwise paths. The lemur looked past the ants' procession and at the origin of change. Painted upon the page was a perfect circle, like the echo of a voice in hopeful woe. It was the sun and the moon, the eye and the soul, the earth and sky, a teardrop of truth into the puddle of his understanding, rippling the image of his reality. Within an emptiness, endless resonance became emergence, a burgeoning. In every direction, the inflorescence of quintessence. The flower of life that blossomed alone heralded fields of future blooms. Like the rain, a cascade of causality was a choir awoken by one. Simplicity became complexity. Circles converging circles opened pathways of possibility. Whole became as but a piece of greater design. Rings hidden beneath layers of truth revealed sight and sound as intertwined. At the confluences of influence from circumferences of constance, end became beginning again for the flowers that dared to share petals. The blossoming of consciousness was both mirrored and caused by that symbol of symmetry where frequency and geometry met in symphony. The discovery of patterns was to Mew the discovery of meaning. From afar, all that had seemed apart was closer. A perfect perception of the present preceded prediction of the future. The lemur's eyes overflowed with realization, pulled by the moon of knowledge. Mew could see his own gaze, the world reflected within, into the space without and around, where the ellipse dances of stars near and far came together like the petals of one and many flowers. His vision fell into a fractal spiral of never-ending beginnings. The flowers of time opened and closed, sealing the secrets of the ages. Again and again, sleeping eons awoke to him in spinning harmony as dancing snowflakes that never fell, carousels of colour revolving in love over the axis of axiom. A centre could not exist without another. The origin was a congruence of that which already existed. Mew's mind was trapped in a wall alike to the ants beside him. Static attacked. Harm came upon the harmony. Distortions and contortions. A breaching screech. The music of the fates faltered, was altered. Formlessness asserted its own shape. Ill illusion penetrated the conception of truth. The kaleidoscope of his hope was broken, stuck in stutter fixing itself. Mew awoke to find himself gazing skyward, to shattered clouds like the pieces of a broken puzzle he wished to solve. All the rain had fallen away, and the lemur felt as if he too had fallen from some place far above. The distant sun, that radiant soul as if a whole made whole, seemed alone no more, cradled in halos of its own making. Like the ripples of song upon the waters of heaven, the flow of cycling circles flowered outward as the self-same truth revealed by the page, the unseen seed of life, a sight that granted sense to chaos. Their motion was music, a radiant resonance in overture, overwhelming from waking tides that drowned the world in tones of reified time. As upon the shore, where the realms of land and sea overlapped, clouds of otherworldly colour billowed down the sky in breaking waves, a falling curtain, revealing that which lay behind. A new vista in mystic magenta splotched with violet blooms lay before the still-seated lemur, himself gazing across the rooftops to the ends of his known world, where terraced cliffs loomed like steps to a place beyond. Creatures like ribbons of being swam amidst the sky, weightless worms in soaring scores, half translucent, half present. In pink and in crimson, their paths did not heed the thermals of escaped steam. Their rapid rippling seemed a dance of defiance. All were aligned in swarm towards their quarry, the teeming feast of a fallen colossus, a decaying beast like a mass of melted wax, the candle of its existence at an end. Dispossessed of colour, its collapse rendered it irrecognizable to the formidability of former form. The body was a landscape in itself, slumped over blocks of residences wherein sliding sludge detached and by the density of death, phased in fall to the realm of flesh. The lemur knew then that in the verticality of reality, ecosystems existed as below and so above, of the flesh and so the soul. His pupils quivered as the parasites of the paramount painted a horizon of horror, a phantasmagoria of feeding phantoms. Like a sun of serpents, a writhing radiance, the worms penetrated the abstract mass, suctioning essence unto their grotesque engorgements of doubling growth, their own colour densifying as the nauseous motions of their tails extended in frenzied flapping upward of 30 metres. Their undulations swallowed sound in deep distortions like gulping pulses. Realization came to Mew that as he watched them, they watched him. Hidden in the clouds like the spirals of wind was a pattern that observed in return. A unity of many in voracious vortex, flying figures as no more than broken slivers of string or an eye of hypnosis. The sky seemed a lake's reflection of the ants beneath, those images drawn by the mage's pages. As in the ocean, the life form's movement affected the medium of motion, the arcane plane that was the dimension of intention. As eaters of ether, the slivers painted themselves with the colours of others, drawing closer to the palette of the planet, densifying in their descent. Counterclockwise like rewinding time, that gyre of desire was a wheel thieving thoughts, a reel reliving memories taken in as reversed melodies. Mew understood then that their funneling was an entrance to a tunnel of their own entrancement. There, too, in that place between places, existed the separation of species. Their pattern was breached by a creature swooping down, perceptible only as the phantasmal frame of a skeletal whale swallowing swaths through the swarm, displacing the remains in furious flurries like a splash of sea. The hollow whale densified into visibility as it filled and bound itself with that bounty, revealing an ectoplasmic film that encapsulated a luminously translucent stomach sac, a dim core orb connected to a system of intestines that were crackling coils of violet-red energy. From beneath the reaping, the dispersal of that concentric congestion dispelled a stupor that the lemur had not realized he had become ensnared by. The relief of its release, bringing a return of breath and sense, alike to the rebalancing of aerial pressure. The theatre of atmospheric fears had been revealed, and no desire of understanding could compel Mew to remain. A swift swivel left his terror at the terrace as new aberrations entered the stage. Astral giants striding upon scores of stilts like scythes, harvesting the horizon of their encroach to the territory of a dead tutelary. Creatures like unfinished creations, their pronograde frames were as made of wires in a pelage of cilia. Pale sketches of sticks sprouting tangles of tentacles, mirroring the disarray of thought. To those ever starving skeletons of consciousness 50 metres in height, the huts of the slums were as but steps. The pit of Rakata had become the nexus for the next struggle of domain dominancy. The creatures collided in writhing wrath, taking from each other to complete themselves as adversaries for the advent of a new Archon. Away from the untold vistas of an untold world, the lemur leapt from ledges in flight from plight, down misaligned alleys and past hissing pipes, deeper into the bowels of the slum bowl. His hops could not hope to be quick enough to hide from the sky. Passing across the sunshine were parasites in parade. Orange jellyfish as broad as they were numerous, 10 meters in diameter like horizontal platforms. The slender curtains of their tentacles raked throughout Rakata, phasing past rooftops and walls, imperceptible to humans, but not without consequence. Like strings onto marionettes, auric pulses travelled from unknowing heads and up thieving threads. Against his every previous instinct, Mew chanced passage into a communal corridor of unknown destination, formed by the overhanging floors of upper-story apartment blocks. It was a place where the wind did not stir, leaving the stench of stagnant thoughts. All around were floating motes of unknown glow. Fleeing through their fields felt closer to falling, as if deeper into water. The sound of the sun turned to a lesser sum, dimmer, darker, those tones like drowning moans pulled down and polluted with the crackling noise of breaking thresholds. The crystals of the lanterns had long since cracked and left the concrete damp with cold and grey. Black plastic garbage bags were jumbled in stacks beside corroded doors. To anyone that may have seen, the Sifaka seemed as a small child fleeing from imaginary monsters. The people, like doleful dolls in hovel homes, were blind to their voyeurs, empty entities of translucent sentience. Slow, glowing siphonophores, like pale plastic bags, polluted thought, clinging to something beneath the skin. They swallowed with the sound of synthetic compressions, contortions of comprehension suffocating sanity. The walls were watching, slithering with living, curling tendrils like hundreds of hungry hands grasping and snatching at the embers of lost emotion. The rumbling of sewage pipes felt as being inside the belly of a beast. Free-floating worms that were but impressions of form drifted between breaths, simple ripples feeding to be more. Unseen, they were as part of the world as were the worms hidden in the soil beneath human feet. Their phallic heads of the most basic instinct desired to be wombed again, away from the world, returned to the bodies of their creation, a place to be whole and one, closer to the bliss that came before. Suspended upon suspirations, coils of collection like intestines trapped outside the body festooned passing family rooms. Flying centipedes like disembodied spinal columns darted in and out of crooked windows. Those creatures were different, no longer impressions of form, but of a denser definition, closer to overcoming the transience of translucence. Harsh warbles of warped space lashed out from the creature's dashes. Rounding a corner, the corridor teemed with the scurrying spirals of insects unseen to eyes self-deceived. Like encroaching cockroaches, the invisible infestation gathered around an inebriated man that stumbled into discarded crates, scratching at his subconscious, coughing from a ceaseless sickness. He fell over, and they crawled upon him like a cursed scrawl, nearing his ear. The mites burrowed into the mines of the mind. Through and out the hall, the lemur returned to the outside gloom where the black pollen soot of the day's bloom fell like dead pixels. Crossways of wire dark against the haze were a guide to escape that maze. Tangled and taut, their tension pulled at the walls. To stay within mutual danger was Mew's last resort. Threading that disarray was a changing chain of colours pulsing with the gradient grace of a rainbow. It was akin to a stretched strand of DNA, a silk spun from dreams, mutable like life itself. Mew followed beneath the tiny ladder twisted upon itself, where it crossed with others into a web of vibrancy amidst the slum's monochrome misery. Another heeded the helixes, a butterfly of eyes guided as if by fishing line. A master of webs awaited at the crossing of colours. A dark arachnid-like knotted, emaciated knuckles gripped the threads spun not from the spider, but from its prey. The butterfly was lost to the lie of lustrous lines. A startled stop of the lemur's bounds to not be found left him at the end of options. His eyes quivered bright against his dark skin. Beyond the nest of threads, the sky seemingly fell apart into myriad colours like a shattered mirror. Its thousand shards rushed towards him. The lemur was caught in a flurry of butterflies, blinded by their many eyes. His fur rippled from a whirlwind of wings. They were the free leaves of a forest that no longer existed, a wood of words in languages he did not understand. They spoke without listening. Hurried hushes repeated prophecies of the past. The choir in chaos was chased by streaking streams of other colours, covetous comets red in anger and green in envy, yet blue in fear. Their own shapes shifted, undecided until form followed function. Flying flagella rippled in pursuit like a swarm of spermatozoa. They were 1,000 seeds of lost thoughts seeking to be sown inside the dreams of others. Away from the tsunami of enemies, Mew's claws scraped to escape. His footfalls fell with the fleetness of a fiddle in scrambling staccato. High and low, as if through falling trees, he again fled to the rooftops. Leaping the gaps, it seemed that the lemur flew with the butterflies. He was but a pastel ghost dashing through brilliant splashes in a crazed painting of amalgamation. Wings came together like the striking streaks of cascading strings. Mew's steps were but another melody to the symphony. Enemies spiraled together like the very coils that coded life. A ladder of colour curved unto the sky. The lemur was again alone at a building's edge, left only to watch the spectral spectacle above. From afar, the chaos of many seemed the serenity of one. They swirled like storm clouds in a dance of chance. Their movements were music, beautiful repetitions doomed to end. Another witnessed the unseen. Beneath that violet and violent vista, the lemur noticed the idle eidolon of a lone woman, her shimmering shape a knee in nude reverie, pale as a swan of the swamp, holding herself against the cold of solitude. Her hair, like snow, flowed upon the tides of ideas. Silver streams reached back to the dreams of a distant past. Her body was a memory that remained, the constant of a consciousness, a will unwilling to be washed away. Galatea gazed into the sun of creation and dissolution. She was but a flower, luminescent, waiting for rain's descent. The lost paths of other lesser spirits flying overhead overlapped with the set, mechanical routes of aerial traffic. That the sun illuminated truth was a lie, for its glory hid the darkness beyond the sky. She stood, lateral to and upon a wall, gravity as if to nothing, defiant of the world's laws. In a lifetime past, when memories were experiences and her happiness existed together with her body's reflection in the eyes of her beloved and betrothed, when death was but a distant concept, she believed that the vaunted vault of sky hid the hope of paradise. The certainty of eternity was the promise of purpose. To know the soul was to know significance, to be significant. Yet the flesh sheltered the spirit from the rueful truth as a cocoon to a butterfly. The zenith of the sun was encircled by a great eel of 8 fins, chasing flurries of things like flying fish. Predation predated purpose. As above and so below, another life promised another death. She had been so certain that the invisible was to be indivisible, safe from disgrace. Staying together, the families of fish swirling overhead had their meaning eaten by a giant manta ray, swooping down to scoop them into its maw. Her hidden paradise hid but parasites. The eye of the sun watched the world in its woe, a painted playground of illusions in impressionism. Clouds swirled like hypnotic brushstrokes, caressing each other in mauve love as did the grand sweeping strings of an orchestra, resonating in the emptiness of her longing. Even then, the solar sigils signified order, ordainment, patterns like music and paths to follow, hand in hand with the smile she believed she'd see again. The ring of Rulia seemed a bridge between heaven and earth, a path to where the one she adored waited upon a distant shore. When her hope was still within her heart, the tides of time had stolen her love, left her to drown alone in a land like sand beneath the sea. The sky became an ocean of separation. Her soul in solitude was a state of persistence, if not existence. Consciousness, if not life. She awaited fate beneath the waves in the weight of her flesh, dreaming that she would awaken in death beside him, together forever in that place beyond the beyond. Such passion could not remain passive. She chose to chase the sea, diving into the sky, her body left behind as upon a silent strand of 1,000 empty seashells. Horizontal with the horizon, her hair like rivers of thought flowed upwards towards her desire. She wished to die again, if only to silence the agony of a love gone. To let herself fall back into the sky in reverse rain was the default of a spirit. They did not fly, but merely held on to the earth. To glide was to chance to swim beneath the abyss, between surrender and defiance in the balance of self. She listened to glistening stars drip onto the sky like erroneous paint upon a canvas, melodious as the notes of a distant piano falling into place. Had the tides carry her call across the sea? She wondered if she was as voiceless as she was invisible, as choiceless. A creature like a giant chameleon sat perched upon a building's edge, mouth agape, the colours of the clouds swirling into his mouth, swallowing the spirals. She was a cloud that would not fade. A cold glow surrounded her. Like figments of pigment, lesser auric organisms amassed before and behind her, up and down the wall. The dozen creatures were alike to eukaryotic cells, each being a red orb nucleus within the deep indigo of an outwardly curved Rollo triangle. With the simple shapes of simple thought, they crawled like coloured shadows, stretching into bridged shapes of 2 before contracting again. They surrounded her as moths to flame. They made rudimentary sounds like zipping downward pulses in the frequency of their shape. She did not heed their attention. To her, the worlds of Aya and Rulia were distant parallels, more alike than different amidst the myriad realms she had voyaged. She saw in Rulia that which she had seen before, the signs of a society designed to fail, a stage set for the manipulation of man from behind the veil. Such was the world to which she called him. Such was the only place in which they could remain. She watched with a quiet contempt the creatures that had come to feed, to eat her future and her past. To the parasites of a promised paradise, as effortless as it was meaningless, an absent-minded gesture rendered an absence of space. She killed with a half-hearted sway and a clenching of her palm. They were what stood between her and her love. Distorted frames broke, spilling their colour like smoke that returned to the clouds. The sky was a deeper pink, aglow with the flaring fall of a coming comet. Sensing a presence approaching, both she and the lemur turned to the invisible star in searing streak. With lingering burn, its path and landing were obscured by the rooftops of the slums. A tension swelled like quivering strings scraped to the very end of a bow. A silence swallowed the wind. The ribbons of astral worms rippled overhead, away from that place. The chameleon disappeared in fear. A stilted strider on the horizon collapsed. In its stead stood a colossus of loss. Its body foreboding was colour itself, an apparition of transparent pink in the shape of a human, an aberration 40 metres tall with the head of an oblique tulip bulb. Its stance was in slump, slouched and hunched, empty of emotion. Looking down, from its mouth sprouted a 6-petalled flower. Dozens of stamen-like tentacles writhed to the ground, wrangling spirit and person alike, draining their colour. Amidst the immensity of the entity were sounds of souls surrendering, ending, a mournful choir in its mouthfuls. The gorging giant shambled across Rakata. From every building exuded entities in exodus. A flood of thought forms in amorphous amalgamations surged against purge in a cacophony of colours. Galatea was submerged in their orchestra of urgency. Their billowing trails of will clashed as the mad splashes of flame and water. To retain her shape, to remember form in flood, she faced a choice: deny the tides or decide to die. Contorted auras scraped together in effervescent fervence. Holding against hordes, a pale purpose shined amidst vigorous, vibrant violence. She was a lone violin amidst screaming strings. The fire of her heart in her hands, she painted in crimson to overpower their colour, erasing them with her own. The flower came to tower over her. She seared scarlet scars into the air to no avail. Tangling tentacles buried into fleeing entities like roots of doom. The ever-gallant Galatea became a pale gale, a bullet in ballet, her hair as whirling blades slicing a path away from wrath. She dove into the horizon, the tumultuous sea beneath her feet. The lemur witnessed at a distance that glorious escape before following into hiding. The predator stood alone at the apex of power. All that remained had submitted to its summit. The pit belonged to it. The people of Rakata were as blind to their new ruler as to the previous. The many tentacles retracted for its next act. With none above it, the colossus looked to the sky. Its body shrunk, becoming less and more, absorbed up into the engorging pod of its head. There was neither pain nor pleasure in its purpose, only process. The flower opened, awoken to true form, birthing itself. Its radiance was darkness. Petals black as the cosmos unfolded from cliff to cliff. Like the rise of a new sun, its levitation smothered inspiration. The apotheosis of the apostle spun in anti-spiral as the sky became a symmetry of silence.